Okay.
Darn, I should have sent that. Okay, I'm going to let people in now, though.
Great.
11:58, and let's see. Yeah, I couldn't send it, but here we go. Okay. All right, we've got people jumping into the meeting. We'll give, it's 11:59, we'll give a few more minutes.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. We're just going to give a few more minutes as there are people who are just joining now, and we won't go too long. And here we go. Okay. So I thought we'd, everybody, hi. I think I know most of you, but I'm Laureen Von, if I don't, nice to meet you. I'm Laureen, rhymes with Maureen or chlorine, last name Von Clan, and I'm co-chair of CASM. And if you haven't been part of Climate Action Santa Monica before, we are a local grassroots group that works to empower people to use their talents, education, resources, and spirit to make climate change here in our little local home and abroad. So we're going to start just because our SAMOCAN, the purpose of SAMOCAN is to bring together people who are interested in climate. It's a convening, and we're just going to take 10 minutes. We're going to take 10 minutes or so for any announcements. I ask you to keep them very brief because we're only going to take 10 minutes. If you have any announcements that you would like to share for the group about things that are climate related that you might like people to collaborate on with you, or just plain old want them to know about. So raise your hand and I'll call on you and we'll have some announcements if you have anything. Anyone? Okay, Chris, I have to unmute you. And here we go. I hope I can do all these things at once. Okay, Chris,
really quickly.
A brief announcement from our wonderful Chris Gutierrez.
Thanks, Laureen. So I am also one of the West Side community advisors for the Clean Power Alliance. And tonight, the City Council will appoint the Santa Monica board member to represent us. And so just wanted to alert you all to that. Thanks.
Thank you for that announcement. Anyone else an important announcement they'd like to share? Drew Johnstone, please.
Hi everyone, I'm with the city's Office of Sustainability and the Environment. So glad y'all are here. Thank you, Lorraine, for organizing. I just want to share a couple things that OSC is working on. And We're really focused on building decarbonization in addition to going solar, so converting gas appliances to efficient electric alternatives. And there are a lot of great resources available to help you through that process if you're interested in retrofitting your own home. And the city has a rebate right now called Electrify Santa Monica. So I will put a link to that in the chat.
Thank
And
you.
if you don't already, yeah, I really hope you are signed up for the Sustainable Santa Monica newsletter that the city puts out once a month.
Wonderful. Drew, would you remind us how to sign up for that newsletter? I found it a little difficult. Can they just send an email to OSE or something?
No, you have to actually subscribe with the link because it'll add the email to our email platform. So I'll put that link in the chat.
Okay, and you know what? We'll put that in one of our e-blasts as well, so that anyone who is part of our organization can also make sure to get that newsletter. Thank you. Anyone else an announcement they would like to share? Amy Butte, please.
Hi. I am managing the Climate Corps program this year. Chris, I worked with Chris for the past while to learn all the ropes, and this summer our program starts on June 21st, very soon. And we're working in 3 areas, energy, urban heat, and mobility. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we'll be doing project work for 5 weeks after being trained, and we're excited to work in these areas and maybe reaching out for advice and collaboration. The program ends on August 8th.
Wonderful. Amy, thank you so much.
Yeah, we have 21 core this year.
Yes, it's very, very exciting. Anyone else? An announcement, opportunity for collaboration, something they would like people to know about on the climate front? Not seeing a lot of hands go up. Okay, but so we'll get started then. We have a good presentation today. Today's presenter is Dave Rosenfeld, and he is the executive director of the Solar Rights Alliance. They're a group that I have come to know and respect and like their work. I get little e-blasts, little text messages from them when there's something important to do. And they're really carrying the weight on the grassroots level for solar statewide. Dave himself has been a community organizer for over 20 years and believes people power is the best way to overcome special interests. Prior to joining Solar Rights Alliance, he led a successful statewide ballot measure campaign in Oregon to restore career technical education for high schoolers. And before that, he led a 40,000 member public interest organization that successfully worked to reduce health insurance premiums for consumers and combat government corruption. In addition to spending time with his wife and kids, he enjoys running, backpacking, and studying science and philosophy. Don't you gotta love that? So thank you, Dave, for being here today. And I'm gonna ask that people put their questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation, which is gonna be, we think, about 25 minutes long. So I hope you can all, if you do have questions, stay for that. Okay, Dave, I turn the floor over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you so much for inviting me. And thanks everyone for being here, everything that you're doing to protect Mother Earth for maybe a couple of future generations, maybe a lot. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And thank you for the introduction. I'm on the beach. I'm at the beach today. And so let's see what internet's like. If for some reason I'm cutting out, like maybe give me a hand signal and then I'll pause and we'll work through the 21st century together. Okay, so I have a deck. I think the intro is sufficient. So I'm just going to launch right into what we're going to talk about is I'm going to go through basically the state of play for rooftop solar and battery storage, where we are, my case for why we need to keep growing it in order to be able to hit all kinds of goals and important objectives for our communities, what the threat is right now, what the utilities are trying to do to kill rooftop solar, and then what our strategy is and how you can help make sure that we keep solar growing. And basically what's going on is the utilities are in the middle of a profit grab to kill rooftop solar. So if you remember one thing, that's what's going on, and that's what we're trying to stop. So I'm going to share my screen and do about 25 minutes of a little bit of background information. Just give me a sec to pull that up. And then we're going to get going. Can I just get like a, maybe like a thumbs up that you can see the deck? Okay, very good. All right, so we're working to save California solar. Just quickly about Solar Rights Alliance. So we're just one of several, like many organizations, like 150 organizations that are part of Save California Solar. And Solar Rights Alliance is one of them. Just a little bit about Solar Rights Alliance. We're the association of nonprofit association of California solar users. We believe that everyone has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference from the utility. We're basically a big list of people that have solar, people that support solar, people that might want solar someday. 25, 30,000 people on the list. It's growing. Our board is just people that have solar. and so this is some of the folks. I'm not going to play these videos, but I put them on here. If you want to learn more about like who we are, who are some of our members and that kind of thing, you can go to our website. You can watch some of these videos, you can get a sense of like where are people coming from. And I just included this because Ricardo is awesome, and he just like speaks the truth about, why we should use the energy from the sun. Okay, this is not a group where probably I have to do much persuading about why we need to grow rooftop solar, but I think it's just good to kind of like remind ourselves like what this is about and how this fits into a lot of the things that we're all trying to fight for. So when I think about why do we want to keep local solar growing, I think of a first thing is just people ought to have more control over their energy bills. So it's like people, let's put people at the center of this. We've kind of always said that, there's always going to be some people who are going to have to choose between paying their energy bill and buying groceries. And so we try to do things about that. And it's kind of like, we shouldn't have to tolerate that, in my opinion. We're at a point now where people should be able to use technologies like solar that let them become more financially independent, self-sufficient, not have to make that really terrible choice. And we are almost at that point where that could be happening for millions and millions and millions of working class people. Second reason is just power outages. This is our reality. As long as we're going to have a network of long distance power lines that go through fire prone areas, then there are going to be planned power outages. And right now the state has no plan. There is no plan to deal with that other than this sort of like elusive, like let's harden the grid. The only real solution, if we're really serious about protecting communities from power outages, is we need local solar paired with batteries en masse. When you have a battery, then the extra energy that you make during the day gets stored into the battery so that if the power goes out or the sun goes down or anything like that, you can draw from it and you can stitch those together. Once you have a critical mass of solar and batteries in one neighborhood or in one community, you can stitch it together into things that are called like microgrids and virtual power plants that let you share that extra energy with the entire neighborhood or the entire community, whether or not they have solar. So that's another reason why we need more of this local solar is power outages. Then there's just kind of like the thing that I think this group particularly comes together around, which is just like, the planet is burning and we need to get off fossil fuels and we need to get to 100% clean energy, fully electrified as fast as we possibly can. And on the left is a recent report from the California Energy Commission that basically mapped out, okay, how are we going to get to 100% renewable by 2045? What they basically said was we need to triple all forms of wind and solar. So that means we need to triple large scale solar, like solar farms. We need to triple large scale wind, and we need to triple local solar, rooftop solar. We need to triple all of it. And so if you start to then do some of the things that I'm going to talk about in a moment, what the utilities are pushing for that slow down the local solar, then you're going to have to get that renewables from somewhere else. Tripling rooftop solar is a lot of energy. So what are you going to do? Where is that going to go? And already there's pressure in open space and in the desert and on sacred native lands to be building the large scale. So are we going to do more of that? So it's just like that's another reason is like, we need rooftop solar because we need to be putting as much clean energy onto the grid as fast as we possibly can. We shouldn't be slowing down anywhere. And if we slow down the rooftop part, we're going to have to get it from somewhere else. And that's going to make it even harder and more expensive and potentially jeopardize everything that we're trying to do to decarbonize as fast as we can. Then there's kind of the broader economic benefit of rooftop solar. Everyone saves money when there's more rooftop solar on the grid because rooftop solar reduces the most expensive part of our electricity system. The most expensive part of our electricity system is long distance power lines. That is the reason why we're all paying through our nose for electricity. It's the thing also that sparks wildfires, causes the power outages. And rooftop solar reduces the amount of money that we have to spend every single year to both maintain these power lines and then also build new ones to replace the ones that have worn out. And in 2018 alone, because of rooftop solar and because of energy efficiency, both of them work in a similar way. The state canceled 20 massive power line projects that saved the system $2.6 billion in that year alone. And there was an excellent modeling report that came out early last year that projected that if we maximize rooftop solar in the entire country, really kind of use those rooftops to maximum effect, households, American households in general, will end up paying almost $500 million less for electricity over the next 30 years than if we just do the status quo and keep relying on long distance power from really far away. And so that's a big thing. And it's all about, we reduce the most expensive part of the system, and we do that in real time right now. That's another reason why we need rooftop solar, is it'll make the grid of the future cheaper for everybody. So then you would think, okay, well, great. Well, let's all just go to the Bahamas and we're good. Except the utilities hate rooftop solar, and they are working actively to double the cost of rooftop solar such that it would become, we would go back to the days when rooftop solar was only available to extremely wealthy people or DIYers. That was 15 years ago, by the way. It wasn't that long ago that rooftop solar was only available if you were extremely wealthy or extremely technical. And at that point, 15 years ago, there were only 20,000 rooftop solar systems in the state of California. Today, there's over 1 million solar installations. Just under half of all solar is going into working and middle-class neighborhoods. Over 15% of all rooftop solar is serving the most low-income ratepayers, the folks that are on the CARE program, which is discounted energy. And what utilities are now trying to do is basically make solar double the cost of solar so that it becomes out of reach for millions more working and middle-class Californians, just at the point that it is coming within reach for working and middle-class Californians. That's what's going on here. So here's what they proposed. This is what the utilities proposed to the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, which regulates energy in the state and also regulates the key programs that help and facilitate rooftop solar. And let me just, before I go through this, actually, let me just go back for a moment and go, the policy that we're going to be talking about, I try to keep things like very, very simple, so I don't like to use jargon. Let me just use just a little bit of jargon to kind of start with. But the policy that we're talking about is called net metering. Net metering is the foundation of all rooftop solar in California. It's how we got to 1 million solar rooftops, and it is how we will get to millions of solar rooftops in the next 10 years. Net metering is very, very simple. It basically is what lets, and if anyone here has solar, you know what it is already. It's basically when you make your solar, you use a lot of it in real time to power your home, but oftentimes you make extra energy that you're not using. And when that happens, when there's extra solar, that goes out your meter, basically spins your meter backwards, it goes out the wires, and it goes into your neighborhood and is used by your neighbors almost instantly. And the utility sells that energy to your neighbors at the retail rate, and then credits you on your energy bill at the retail rate. And then later on, if you use the utility's energy, for example, at night, that bill credit gets applied. That's what net metering is. It's a way for you to share your extra energy with your neighbors for a bill credit. And it's kind of cool. You spent money, you invested money to put a power plant on your rooftop. You're using it to reduce your burden on the grid and on society and to make clean energy. You share a bunch of that clean energy with your neighbors so that they can do the same. The utility didn't have to spend any ratepayer money to make that energy. They spend virtually no money transporting the energy to your neighbors because the cost of the local grid is negligible compared to the overall grid. And it's just a one-to-one swap in terms of a credit. And it is what allows you to be able to more quickly pay back for the investment that you have made for the greater good. So that's what net metering is. And this is what the utilities want to do. The first thing they want to do is slap every solar user with a monthly tax. It's a fee, but we call it a tax because why not? It's the same thing, intents and purposes. Depending on where you live, you'll pay what you see here every single month. So for example, if you live in SoCal Edison, you'd pay $56 a month for the pleasure of having solar. If you live in SDG&E, you'd be paying more like $91 a month. This would affect also larger commercial solar users like schools and businesses and farms, homeless shelters, food banks. To anyone that's got solar that's a larger commercial, they'll be looking at more like almost $1,000 a month to like $3,400 a month. But that's not all. That's only the first thing they're proposing. The second thing the utilities are proposing is an 80% cut in the credit I was telling you about. Right now, the credit is about the retail rate, about 25 cents per kilowatt hour. They're proposing to bring it down to between 5 and 8 cents per kilowatt hour. But that's not all. The last thing that they're proposing to do is to make it so that any credits that you've accumulated by the end of every month expire at the end of every month. This is significant because right now, the credits expire at the end of the year. Not the calendar year, but the year. Basically, every solar user is on a schedule that starts from the date that their solar turned on, and then it's a whole year. And you get to accumulate that the whole year, and then at the end of that year, it expires and then you start over again. This is important because in the spring and the summer months is when you're producing a lot of that extra energy. That's when you're also accumulating a lot of bill credits that then you use in the fall and the winter months when the sun is not shining as much. And that's part of how this helps pay back the system. By having it expire at the end of every month, combined with an 80% cut in the net metering credit and the monthly solar tax, this doubles the cost of going solar. The utilities want to apply this to both people that have solar now, the early adopters, as well as everyone going forward. The CPUC has said we're only going to apply any changes that we make going forward, but there's still parties in the CPUC proceeding, despite that are proposing to make many of these kinds of changes retroactively. And I'm going to talk about AB 1139 in a moment, and that was obviously a play to make all these changes apply retroactively. So as far as we're concerned, everything is on the table right now, whether you have solar or not. You might get affected by this stuff, and everybody has a dog in this fight. The utilities have made their intentions very, very clear. So then where is the battlefield in all of this? Thankfully, we're now back to having one battlefield. A week and a half ago, we were fighting two fights. But let me just spotlight the CPUC for a moment, and then I'll just reference the legislative fight that just wrapped up because many of you were involved in that, and I thank you for that. But thankfully, we've gotten that off the table. Mostly everything is happening at the California Public Utilities Commission. They are in the middle of what's called a proceeding. CPUC proceedings, if you have never been involved in them, is a little like sticking a pen in your eye. It is like the worst possible form of a governmental process I've ever encountered. It is clearly intended to shut the public out, in my opinion. It's awful, but that is the process that we have. And they're in the middle of a year-long proceeding that launched late last year and they're going to make a final decision at the end of this year. And that decision, they are definitely going to revise the net metering program. That there's no question about that. These are 5 people. They are unelected. They're political appointees. The governor appoints them. This group right here, most of them were appointed by Jerry Brown. A few of them were appointed by Gavin Newsom. And the proceeding number is this, if you want to look it up yourself, and we've got materials that can help you dig in. That's where everything is at. That's where utilities have put proposals to the CPUC. There's good guys that have put proposals to the CPUC to protect and strengthen net metering, and that's the primary battlefield. About a month and a half ago, the utilities clearly were not content with just fighting to kill rooftop solar here, and so they got lackeys in the legislature to introduce AB 1139, which would have essentially forced the CPUC to adopt the utility proposal and apply those changes retroactively to the 1 million early adopters of solar. For those of you who were involved in defeating this bill, thank you. It was extraordinary effort, and we did not think that we were going to defeat it this early. To give you a sense of just how powerful the grassroots opposition to that bill was, Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks up in the Bay Area reported to us that she got 1,500 phone calls from constituents in the week and a half before everything came to a head. And we've gotten routine reports from lawmakers that most of them got at least 300, 400, 500 phone calls from constituents. So thank you. And then also to just underscore what the fight is like, all we did was we took one battlefield off the table. So now we're back to just one battlefield. And so great, we'll take what we can get.
Dave, I just want to tell this group that our assembly person, Richard Bloom, voted in favor of AB 1139, which was disappointing considering the calls he got from many people here.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, there's going to be some accountability, hopefully, to be had by some of these lawmakers, and we can help you do that in a way that is tasteful but stern. So, so the CPUC, but really, it's about this guy. Our strategy is basically he's going to be the one this is going to be on, and we want to make this his problem because most people don't know who the CPUC is. Their process is not democratic in the slightest. We want people to go to the CPUC, and when I talk about what we do later on, I'm going to talk about what you can do. But really, it's about him, and we want to make it about him, and we want him to feel like he's on the hot seat, and that if things go south, it's going to be on his hands. And we want him to basically make a decision that goes, I don't want to be the guy that gave PG&E the knife to kill rooftop solar. So keep him in your sights, even as you're keeping CPUC in your sights. And it's basically both of them are the ones who we want to be in the hot seat here. All right, so what do the utilities say? Obviously, the utilities don't say, oh, boo-hoo-hoo, rooftop solar cuts our profits, so we have to kill rooftop solar. Instead, what they've done is they've set up a nice looking front group called Affordable Clean Energy for All. This is, by the way, documented. The law requires them to put this in writing that they're actually the ones behind this. And if you go to their website, which is fixthecostshift.com, what they say is literally this, that rooftop solar users are just a bunch of rich people who took their ball and took it home. They don't pay their fair share of the grid. They force all the people that don't have solar to pay more than their fair share for the grid. And on top of that, they get this sweet little net metering thing that isn't fair, and they shouldn't be getting that much money for their extra solar because it's not really that valuable anyway. And all of this is really inequitable and is the reason why electricity bills are going up for people, and that sucks, and we need to do something about it. So that's their line. And this is another way to look at it. This is the way we look at what their story is, which is they're looking for a scapegoat to hide the fact that it's their long distance power lines and the profits that they make off of long distance power lines that are causing most of the problems related to both the cost of electricity and the dangerousness of our electricity system. And they're blaming it on rooftop solar. And that's true because the real villain is long distance power lines. In 2021, this year alone, we're going to pay $4 billion for long distance power lines. We're paying for it already. We're also paying for wildfire mitigation. The last year that we have numbers on record for this, in 2019, all ratepayers forked over $5 billion for wildfire mitigation on these power lines. And the CPUC estimates that that's going to be a pretty consistent annual cost, and in fact, will go up. In the last 9 years, the public has paid $20 billion through our rates for long distance power lines. And the key thing to understand is that this is the utility profit model. They get a guaranteed 8 to 10% profit on top of every dollar that they get to spend building and maintaining long distance power lines. This is how they make the money. This is why they collected more than $20 billion in profits over the last 10 years. And it's why our costs have gone up, because they're incentivized to spend more money on long distance power lines. And they have captured the regulatory agencies so much that they've let them do that. It's only been in the last few years that power line spending has slowed down. And that's mainly because the rooftop solar has just made it so obvious that we can't keep spending, we don't need to spend as much, that the state grid operator is starting to throttle back. But it was only very recently. And meanwhile, we've got this massive long distance power line system that's poorly maintained, that has sparked wildfires and is really, really expensive. And we're now stuck with a bunch of these costs, and we should be starting to figure out how to wind them down or at least hold them flat. That's the villain, is the long distance power lines. And it is rooftop solar that is doing the biggest lift to mitigate the cost of long distance power lines. And I already showed you the slide, but I want to kind of repeat it again because it bears repeating that we, the solar people and the future solar people, are one of the best things we can be doing to make the grid cheaper for everybody and hold down the cost of long distance power. The public is with us. We did a recent poll, and to the shock of nobody, we found that the public wants to do more to encourage solar, that they support net metering. And even when presented with the utilities' very powerful arguments, most people still oppose reducing the net metering credit. And this holds firm for both Democrats and Republicans and people who are unaffiliated. It's one of the few things left where there is a very strong social consensus. Our goal is just to keep solar and get solar and batteries in the hands of millions of Californians. So our goal is, one, keep solar growing. It's about 150,000 new solar projects a year. Like I said, just under half are going into middle and working class neighborhoods. Let's keep that growing. Number two is, let's make it even more equitable. What can we be doing over the next 10 years so that the trend line, which is already really great in terms of solar going into working class neighborhoods and for renters, let's make it even more affordable for them so that the trend line is just going even better and better for the folks in our society that could use a break the most. And then the final thing is, let's use the next 10 years and use net metering to incentivize solar powered batteries so that by 2030, all solar is paired with a battery, which has then it multiplies all of the benefits of solar even more. So how do we do that? We have to win a strong net metering policy at the CPUC. Congratulations again on defeating AB 1139. That was on the to-do list. We took it off. So now we only have one huge job to do now between now and the end of the year. We are still calling this the utility profit grab because it is. It was always about a utility profit grab to kill rooftop solar. This is Bob the Monopoly Man. We're taking him around the state. This was a rally we did at the Capitol once we started to cry BS on the bill. The initial step, many of you have done this already, is to sign the petition to Governor Newsom and the CPUC, calling on them to stand up and keep solar growing, reject the utility proposal, and instead do a set of things to net metering that only strengthen it, especially for working class communities. Sign it, share it, propagate it. And by the way, this would be for any of you that are involved in organizations. If you would prefer not to kind of send your members to here, and you rather keep your list contained, then you can totally grab the language in the petition and just kind of host it on your own servers, So we'll work with you to do that. We don't really care where people sign it or how as long as it ultimately gets to the governor and the CPUC, and we can help you coordinate it. The second step is, and this happens automatically if you sign this petition, it'll take you to a page where you get the governor's phone number, but we want to get the governor, we want a consistent, steady stream of phone calls from the public into the governor, because I think, as this group knows, signing a petition is great, but phone calls are even better. And then the third is kind of a big litany of things. It's sort of like choose your own adventure. And sorry, that should have said text and call lists to public. So any of your lists, just get your list kind of spun up about this. We need people to be testifying at the CPUC. They meet twice a month. And what we want to have is, over the next 3 months, every single time they meet, there's more and more people lined up to give 2 minutes of testimony. And so something to think about if you like doing that kind of thing is just sign up for all of them, because you can have a repeat performance. Claire Broom, who's involved in the 350 group up in Northern California, I think she's up in NorCal, maybe she's in SoCal. Okay, never mind. Claire Broom, great person, many of you might know her, has been basically at every single CPUC meeting, hammering away at how they need to be focusing on long distance power lines. So the point is, whether it's one or all, we need more voices at the CPUC. We're going to need a lot of help with the media. We need to make sure that they get it. And then you don't have to follow us on Twitter. And if you're not a social media maven, then God bless you, because social media is toxic. But if you are on social media and you want to kind of get involved in the Twitter scrum that's going on, feel free to follow us. And then you'll see we're always kind of posting content that you can grab and share and mix up and that kind of thing. And we have kind of a cool little Twitter thread going on with a bunch of other allies where we kind of share content and coordinate a lot of the work we're doing. Okay, that was a little more than 25 minutes. Sorry, Lorene. And this is a cartoon that was published by the Fresno Bee. They did a great positive editorial in favor of our campaign, as did the LA Times about 2 months ago. And we were psyched when we saw that the Fresno Bee not only said it in words, but said it in cartoon. So let me stop sharing my screen now.
Okay, Dave, wow, you are so articulate on this and straight to the point. Thank you very much. We did have a question relevant to your last comment, which is which CPUC meetings, I mean, and how we just go to the cpuc.org or something. Can you put that in the chat if you think of it, or just tell people now and maybe somebody else could put it in the chat. We will make the chat available. Actually, yeah, let's just hope that somebody else puts it in the chat. So Dave, let's move to a comment that was made in the chat on water. And can you just maybe connect the dot? Andrew made a comment that water is huge for energy production. And is there a line that you can draw here?
I am just learning about this connection. I was on the phone yesterday with Andrea from Azul. People have heard of them. They're a group that works with frontline communities, particularly around water justice in SoCal and also out in some of the rural parts of the state. And she was telling me, so this is kind of my own learning curve, that the process of getting water to people is actually incredibly energy intensive. And that this is one place where kind of investing more in local solar would make a big difference. So that seems like kind of one thing that I'm wanting to just understand more of. But I would think kind of the first place that I would go is just like back to climate change. I mean, it really is about like how quickly can we get clean electrons onto the grid and also then get people to electrify as quickly as possible so that we're just shutting down our use of fossil fuels in every possible way. And obviously the quicker we do that, then the less extreme, droughts are going to be in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. I mean, that's at this point, that's where we're looking ahead to. So to me, it's kind of like we are saving water for future generations the quicker that we can just put more clean electrons onto the grid. But honestly, this is something that I'm learning more about. So I would love to hear more for folks who do know more about this issue.
So just a reminder, please put your questions and comments in the chat and we will get to them because there are people who've been posting them there and I want to make sure we honor their questions rather than jumping into group discussion. I hope that's okay. There was a comment made by Aram that, why are we fighting the utilities when we can ask them to be part of the solution to work with us? They could be doing solar installations, et cetera. And I wonder, there's nothing stopping the utilities from moving toward more rooftop solar, right? I mean, Dave, can we actually make them partners? Is this a possibility at this moment?
I mean, anything is a possibility. I mean, here's the history. The history has been this. So let's go back even like 20, 30 years where people were saying we should be investing more in clean energy. At this point, it wasn't even about rooftop solar versus utility scale solar. It was, we ought to be doing more renewable energy. Utility companies at that point were fully invested in fossil fuels and they fought it, every tooth and nail, completely in bed with the fossil fuel industry. They were part and parcel of the same thing. 15 years ago, when the Million Solar Roofs campaign got traction and Governor Schwarzenegger was starting to like really push the idea that let's start a solar revolution in the state, the utilities lobbied to try to kill it, like just completely lobbied to kill it. Schwarzenegger and some good thinking legislators said, we're going to do it anyway. And we did it. And at the time, they lost that battle, but they weren't really paying much attention. Now, here we are 15 years later, and the state has, clearly set its path in going, we are going to renewable energy. And the utilities now are pivoting and going like, okay, yeah, we're in favor of renewables, but the renewables that we want are wind farms and solar farms and basically all the forms of energy that we can control. And what we don't want is the forms of clean energy that we can't control because we want to own it all. And we have never said, don't do utility scale solar. We need it all if we're going to decarbonize. So we've never picked this fight with them. They've consistently just been against everything at every step of the way, anytime that it was outside of their interests. So if the utilities all of a sudden came to the table and said, okay, you're right, we're wrong, and we we want to be a part of the transition, and we believe in all, forms of clean energy, and we want to aid and abet rooftop solar. There's lots of ways we would love to work with them, but all the evidence points to every single idea that we have ever put on the table. They try to kill if they can't completely control it and use it to their advantage in terms of making more profits. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it is that way. And sometimes the battle picks us rather than us picking the thing that we want.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to put some good wishes out there that we end up being wonderful partners with the utility industry to accomplish some of these goals. We've had another comment about the renters and multi-family buildings. This is a bugaboo. CASM itself and the city of Santa Monica are trying to bust through on this. Where is the Solar Rights Alliance on that, and what can we do to advance this? Because we have so much great flat rooftop in Santa Monica on multi-unit buildings.
Yeah. So first off, contrary to the myth that utilities peddle, there is actually quite a lot of solar that serves multifamily homes and affordable multifamily homes at that. Not enough, we want more, but it's more than you would think. And in fact, like right now, under construction, there are 30,000 units under construction that will have solar that will serve 150,000 people. That will be completed by the end of this year. So it's just to say we need to do a lot more, but it's more than you might think. That's the first thing. Then second is, and we're working really closely with renters advocates. In fact, we're doing a press conference in front of the CPUC tomorrow, and among the speakers are going to be some folks from the Bay Area renters rights community. But the first and most important thing is net metering. And the reason why is because renters benefit from net metering too. When an apartment building owner installs solar, there's a program, it's called virtual net metering, where then when the apartment building sends extra energy back to the grid, the apartment building then gets a credit, and the credit gets divided among all the units and automatically goes on to those utility bills. And so renters benefit from net metering, and net metering is a key part of making solar pencil out for multifamily homes. That's number one. Then number two, there is a program in the state of California that's called SOMA, and it is designed to basically work to kind of leverage net metering to lower the cost of putting solar on a multifamily home that serves low-income residents. And SOMA so it's kind of a way of kind of buying down the price of solar even more, and to incentivize multifamily home developers and also existing landlords to get the solar on top of the rooftop. One thing, and affordable developers, they like it because it actually allows them to build more units. It buys down the cost of the utilities so much that they can actually add some more units, which is good for solving the housing crunch. But the nut to crack, as you said, the bugaboo, as it were, is how do you get landlords of existing multifamily homes to jump in? And this is where, if we had our druthers, and this is something that it's on our list of things, like if we were not fighting net metering, like just trying to protect the basic thing, this would be one of our top priorities, is how do we just beef up the SOMA program, like really beef it up? Like how do we triple the funding, quadruple the funding for it, and there's a bunch of red tape. The utilities, add a lot of red tape so the money doesn't get out the door as quickly as it should. A lot of landlords don't want to bother with the paperwork, so we want to get that streamlined. And then there's like other pain points, like a lot of kind of older multifamily homes, the roof maybe isn't such great shape, so you'd need to kind of fix the roof. And the SOMA program doesn't really account for that. This would be a very cheap add-on, would just be like, let's just fix the roof. Like just get that as part of the whole thing. So it's a pain point that we get out of the way. So again, it's kind of like these things cost money, but compared to like what we spend money on right now, it's actually you get a lot of bang for the buck by kind of beefing that thing up. So these are some ways that we can go from here to there. But the most important thing is we do have to protect net metering, and we have to strengthen it in a bunch of ways to just make it work better to the advantage of a multifamily home.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. We have a couple of questions more on this net metering. Is there a state that has, in your view, a model net energy metering tariff structure that California should mimic?
We are the model. So all of us are over the age of 18. And I think all of us, as we entered into adulthood, we kind of came to that shocking realization of like, holy crap, we're in charge now. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm in charge. If you've had that feeling, this is kind of it. We are on the leading edge, folks. Like California is 10 years ahead of everywhere, including other states that are leading on solar. We are it. And essentially the fight that we're having right now, where the utilities are saying, okay, clean energy is fine, but we want to own it. And we're going to stop you from being able to have any stake in that. That if, however this gets decided here, is how it's going to roll in the other 49 states, and it's going to influence what the federal government is doing. So, and then that's going to influence whether we succeed at solving climate change, whether we can keep clean energy affordable and reliable for the masses, all the things that kind of come along with kind of a Green New Deal and the idea of putting people kind of side by side with the need to protect the planet. So this is it. This is the leading edge fight, and how it's going to, how it unfolds will impact the debate everywhere else.
Please put more questions in the chat. We have a few more minutes here. I would like to ask you, Dave, we are partnered with, and in Santa Monica, we have so many other environmental organizations focused on the Bay, focused on other issues, food and plastics. And what are some of the ways that you can encourage us to or help us engage them in this very technical issue of energy rate plans, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, and all these things are important. I mean, at various points in my kind of organizing, I've, kind of done completely different things that were also at the time really important, like plastics, antibiotics on farm animals, just a litany of things that are like important existential, things. I mean, kind of as somebody where if I think of like, I think of this issue in a lot of ways, obviously, but when I think of like the core way I think about it it's about climate change. And, the utilities have an interest in making it wonky and complicated energy policy. Just saying the word energy policy itself is just kind of like, meh. But for me, at least, if when I start to kind of feel like this thing is getting too confusing, I kind of just come back to going like, we're in a crisis. We are burning fossil fuels. We should have stopped burning all the fossil fuels 20 years ago. And we have to stop burning fossil fuels. And the state has a goal of stopping, switching over to be 100% clean by 2045. That's frankly way too far into the future if we really think about it. And we need to be putting as many clean energy electrons onto the grid as we possibly can. We need to be retiring these fossil fuel plants ahead of schedule. We need to stop any new fossil fuel development. And we need to be encouraging and helping people switch from gas-powered cars and appliances to electric ones. And rooftop solar and battery storage is one of the fastest, quickest, and cheapest ways to get there. In addition to the kind of like bigger infrastructure that we also have to build side by side. And so it's, and by using the built environment to do it, we will have to use less of the unbuilt environment to do all the rest of it. And so when I just think of like 7th generation, reduce your footprint, conserve Mother Earth, and also use what we have already first before you start using something new. To me, that's what it's about. And for folks that don't have the time or the ability or willingness to kind of like dive into the minutia, I feel very comfortable just saying like, that's what Governor Newsom needs to hear is just kind of like the basics. And that's to me what this comes down to.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple other sort of technical questions, but one is the Solar Rights Alliance a party in the net energy meeting proceedings that you referenced before?
No, we're not a party. That was an intentional decision by me. That, it's really, it's a lot to be a party. And you have to spend a lot of time on technical stuff. And while I do, I'm not super technical. I'm technical enough to kind of like make sure that I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this stuff. I wanted to spend our time as Solar Rights Alliance alerting the public, talking about this to the public, and mobilizing the public and educating the public and getting the public involved. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to the parties in the proceeding, both folks in the solar industry and folks in the nonprofit world, to make sure that I understand what's happening, to make sure I understand what's in their proposals. And that's kind of my, the role that we're playing is kind of taking that, trying to translate it into at least like 6th grade English, which is about all I can do. And then, but making sure it's accurate, and then getting that out to the public and giving them ways to kind of weigh into what can be a very, very intimidating process. And this is my way of saying, you don't have to be an expert to have standing to be able to have an opinion about this kind of stuff.
Thank you. And have you made a decision about if your group, or can you tell us about a group that is addressing potential subsidies or rate relief for lower income and disadvantaged communities, like what they're doing for EVs and EV infrastructure?
Yeah, so there's 3 proposals at the CPU, to speaking of parties in the proceeding. The 3 proposals that we like all are very similar in how they address, like, how can we improve and increase access to local solar for disadvantaged communities. So I'll just tell you what the proposals are, who the parties are that we favor, and then also what the specifics are. So the California Solar and Storage Association is one proposal that we like. The other one is a joint proposal between a nonprofit group called Vote Solar and then another solar industry group called SIA, and we like that one too. And then there's a third one by a group based in San Diego, a nonprofit that's called the Protect Our Communities Foundation. And, again, there's differences between all 3, but they're kind of distinctions without a difference in that they more or less preserve the framework of net metering and then lean in on, like, how do we make it better and make solar more accessible for working class and low income communities. The key thing to improve net metering for working class communities is to do 3 things. One is, at all costs, do not cut the credit on net metering for care customers. So even if we end up reducing the credit or kind of gradually reduce it for the general market over the next 10 years, of which there's a general consensus that it will go down a little bit, let's keep it as rich as we can for care customers. That's number 1. Number 2 is care is a discounted energy program. So number 2 is actually let care customers get the full net metering credit rather than a discounted credit. Something that's really screwed up about the way that net metering works for care customers now is that their net metering credit is discounted the same way that the energy they buy from the utility is discounted, which is so messed up if you think about it. And we brought this up with the CPUC for years and they haven't listened, which is basically it's saying if you're poor, your extra solar energy is less valuable than somebody who's rich. And it's kind of like, are you kidding me? Like, that's absurd. If anything, your extra solar energy might be more valuable because it's serving communities that really need a lot of clean energy on the grid. So we want to do is make sure that they get the full credit and that it doesn't get cut. And then the final thing is we want to expand the multifamily homes that are eligible for virtual net metering, which, again, not to get into the details, but that's kind of the way that you can make solar work in a multifamily home kind of context. And right now it's only a very small number of apartment buildings are eligible for it. And we want to blow that wide open. And that's within net metering. Like I was saying before, SOMA, there's a few other of these kinds of programs that we can do and layer on top of net metering and make stronger in a low income context. So that's a little bit of kind of like who the players are, that we think are good actors in this proceeding. And then the specifics as it relates to really juicing this up for working class communities.
Thank you. We certainly want to do that here in Santa Monica and are eager to talk about that with you more. We have a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. One is about sharing the toolkit. Thank you, Amy, for asking about how we get the word out. Can it be shared on Nextdoor or portions of it, or how do you want people to handle that?
That's totally fine. Yeah, we wrote everything. If anything I put out, it's intended to be public. So, I trust your whatever you think is going to work for people.
Terrific. And last one here. Let's talk about the duck curve and battery storage. Quack, quack. You said earlier that you want to see battery storage, part of a lot more solar, local rooftop solar. What are the hurdles for doing that and making battery storage a lot more plentiful, accessible, affordable, ecologically sound as well?
Yeah, good question. I want to do two things, if this is okay with you. I'm going to share my screen again. Because the first thing I want to do is, so the duck curve is real, but it actually isn't as big. It's overblown. And I want to show you a way what I mean by that. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and then I'm going to address batteries and kind of the future. So first off, I want to show you a chart. So you'll remember last year, August 14th, this was one of the big rolling power outages that we experienced. And another piece of context is that the way we're supposed to build the grid, the way the grid is built, is you build for your peak events. So you build for like when you really, like the biggest, highest demand days, even if they only happen once or twice or 3 times a year. And in the case of the August power outages, you'll recall what happened was there was a gas plant that got knocked out of commission, and all of a sudden, and it was also super hot. So then energy demand was up at the same time that supply was knocked down. And this is a chart from that we pulled from the California Independent Systems Operator. So that's the grid operator, the primary folks that operate the primary portions of the grid. And the red line is the actual energy demand during that day. And what you can see is that's what it was. And it, kind of usual, it sort of peaks in the evening hours as people come home, or it's really hot, so the ACs are going on and blah, blah, blah. This yellow line is what demand would have looked like if we didn't have all that solar on the grid. And so you can see, had we not had all that solar on the grid, then that day would have been a lot worse. And then the other thing that's interesting is you can see everything would have peaked, the demand would have peaked earlier in the day. And even with the solar on the grid, the demand was peaking later in the day. Remember, this is the summer, so the sun was still up. The solar was still producing. It was still helping. And so that's just one thing about, like, the duck curve is definitely a thing. And I'm going to get to in a second about how the duck curve, we can just make that completely go away if we just stick to the knitting. But it's also to say, let's remember, we build the grid for the peak events, and solar did exactly what it was supposed to do on the day that we really, really needed it. And the power outages would have been a ton worse had that not been the case. So that's number one. Number two is, like, part of our goal with this net metering campaign, and frankly, just with everything else we're trying to do, is by 2030, have all solar paired with a battery. And the cool thing about that is then, in a lot of ways, net metering becomes moot, because all that extra energy you make isn't going out the grid. It's getting stored in the battery in the basement or in the garage or somewhere. And then you're using it when the sun goes down or when the power goes out or whatever. But that's only really the beginning of it. Because as soon as you have a critical mass of solar plus storage in a neighborhood or in a community, then you can wire that community into a microgrid or a virtual power plant. And that's really where the magic, the true thing that we want, the vision, like the beautiful story of like what this could be, really starts. Because once you have that, then even if we still have to rely on long distance power, because we're going to still need to build solar farms and wind farms, and we're still going to have some degree of long distance power lines. If we get a critical mass of solar and batteries in our communities and wire our communities together as a virtual power plant or a microgrid, then all that solar that's getting produced can get optimized for the entire community, whether or not people have solar or not. And that will help outage proof the communities. It'll it kind of smooths out the equity issue. And again, it makes net metering kind of moot. You'd still have it maybe, but it would be much more surgical. You'd be exporting energy from the batteries when you need it. And then otherwise everyone's kind of self-contained. And that's, I don't know if that addresses the question about the duck curve, but that's the way that we think about it at Solar Rights Alliance, is we're trying to move this whole thing from an individualistic thing to something that really, really, we're stitching this all together into something that really benefits the entire community. I mean, it already does, but the existence of solar and batteries really then becomes something where it's like, it just becomes incredibly beautiful and incredibly powerful.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing that with us. It is almost 1 o'clock, and we will wrap up in just a second. I want to thank you and say that I'm hoping we can pull together a whole lot of people to be part of the CPUC testimony. If there's anyone in here who thinks they might be willing to make a statement, please put your name in the chat and we will see what we can do about getting people ready to speak up at the CPUC meeting. So I would love to I plan on going, and I've never spoken at a CPUC meeting. So, okay. Oh, Amy Sullivan, thank you. We've got at least one in there. Do we have two? Do we have two? Let's see, 3. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll get a small army together for that. So, thank you all for being with us today. And Dave, can you are you up for putting your email in the chat as well? And
Yes.
people have asked, I have received a couple emails from people who have wondered if this presentation would be online, and it will. We will find a way to put it on the Climate Action Santa Monica YouTube and have a link onto our website. So thank you very much, everybody, and we will wrap up there. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.